The story began with a man who appeared completely ordinary from the outside, doing a secret mission. He moved all alone to infiltrate a heavily guarded military zone filled with armed troops that night, and thanks to his skills, he easily took down the mercenaries without any trouble. His goal was none other than to rescue a group of children who were being held hostage. However, right after he guided the kids out to safety, he deliberately planted a bomb that instantly leveled the entire building, killing the children inside. Several years later, the man chose to live a quiet life under a disguise. He also took on all kinds of odd jobs, from an apple vendor to a store cashier, and eventually became an innocent-looking insurance agent. His name was Choi Kang, and he recently moved with his family to a new neighborhood to find some peace. However, he did not realize that wherever he went, his past always haunted him. Kang's peaceful life was suddenly disrupted one night when he accidentally saw a strange man dumping trash. At the same time, a woman discovered a plastic bag containing a torn rabbit doll with a terrible smell, and when Kang checked that bag, a man named Byung Nam suddenly appeared and immediately accused him of being the one who had dumped that smelly trash. Of course, Kang instantly denied the accusation because he did not do it. However, the woman happened to suffer from dementia, so she could not defend him. A heated argument broke out until Kang spotted a suspicious person, so he immediately went to catch the person, thinking he might be the culprit. Byung Nam also followed Kang, but he was left far behind and completely lost track of Kang and the suspect. Before long, Kang successfully caught up with the runner, but suddenly, the mysterious person pulled out a gun and began shooting blindly. Fortunately, Kang managed to dodge every bullet calmly. Shortly after that, Byung Nam arrived and asked about the gunshots from earlier. But, to protect his secret identity, Kang chose to lie, claiming that he had not heard any gunshots at all. A few moments later, Kang spotted the mysterious person once again near an ATM. However, just as he was about to approach him, a massive explosion suddenly happened, destroying the ATM and killing the person instantly. After the explosion, medical workers showed up and immediately evacuated the victim. However, Kang realized that the medics were actually military personnel operating in disguise. Knowing this, he chose to keep his fight with the suspect earlier a secret, knowing that if the military was involved in secret, what happened earlier was not an ordinary accident. The next day, because Byung Nam did not trust Kang's words from the night before, he returned to the scene of the fight to search for clues. He was sure that the sound he heard was a gunshot using a silencer, and sure enough, he soon discovered an empty bullet casing on the ground, which instantly made him even more suspicious of Kang because he chose to keep the incident a secret. Meanwhile, at the same time, a member of parliament named Eun Jae was holding a press conference to build a good image in front of the public. With complete confidence, she reassured the citizens that the ATM explosion from the night before was simply caused by a gas leak. However, the atmosphere suddenly changed when a woman named Nam Yun interrupted the speech. Seeing her, Eun Jae's expression suddenly shifted because it turned out they were old friends from high school. Nam Yun then boldly questioned why Eun Jae thought that the explosion was a gas leak, even though the evidence had proved that it was a bomb explosion. Upon hearing Nam Yun's words, the locals quickly suspected that the officials were hiding a secret. Meanwhile, Kang, who was present there, began to sense that something was wrong. He felt that the explosion was planned by the government to eliminate him. After that, Kang went to pick up his daughter, Do-Yun, who was attending a karate class at her kindergarten. Then, before heading home, they stopped by a store, which happened to belong to Byung Nam. Seeing Kang, to prove his suspicion, Byung Nam suddenly pulled out a toy pistol right in front of Kang, and sure enough, Kang quickly grabbed the gun with his quick reflex, which immediately made Byung Nam even more suspicious that he was a threat that needed to be removed.
이건 뭐 하려고? 그럼 너무 비싸요, 은사?
Because of that incident, Kang decided to return to the shooting scene later that night to secure the bullet fired by the culprit. However, upon arriving, he instead discovered Byung Nam hiding there. At that moment, Byung Nam was certain about Kang. He knew that a criminal would always return to the crime scene to cover their tracks, and now Kang had truly come back, proving his theory. However, despite being cornered, Kang chose to walk away instead. After that meeting, driven by his curiosity, Byung Nam finally shared his suspicions with Young-hee, Do-Yun's martial arts instructor.
소리가 작다! 그만! 잘했어.
He then invited Young-hee to slip into the dead culprit's rented room to find information. Inside the dark room, they then discovered a pile of mutilated dolls, which finally answered who had been dumping the mysterious trash bags around the neighborhood. In addition to that creepy scene, Young-hee also saw a laptop in the room. However, after realizing that there was someone hiding behind the wardrobe, they left the place immediately. It turned out that Kang had been following the two the entire time, and driven by his own curiosity, Kang decided to enter the house to inspect it, but he was suddenly ambushed, causing a fierce brawl. However, when Kang managed to fight back, the attacker managed to escape on a motorcycle. Unfortunately, Byung-nam and Young-hee saw Kang leaving the house after the attacker, and this sight made Byung-nam even more convinced that Kang was a dangerous person who brought a threat to their neighborhood. The next morning, Kang was stunned by his neighbor's words, saying that the last explosion was not the first. The neighbor explained that the first attack happened thanks to a man who blew himself up after intentionally ramming his car into another car. Later, when Kang went to pick up Do-yeon, a hitman sped directly toward Do-yeon. Fortunately, Byung-nam and Young-hee, who were standing nearby, reacted quickly to save her. However, upon closer inspection, they realized that the attacker's true target was not Do-yeon, but rather the laptop computer that Young-hee took from the deceased's house. Curious, Kang, Byung-nam, and Young-hee decided to open the laptop to see what was inside. However, they didn't realize that upon turning it on, the laptop triggered a GPS that immediately broadcast their exact coordinates to the assassin. Inside the laptop, they found a dashboard camera footage of the car collision from the first explosion and some important data. Upon finding this information, they realized that the car crash and the ATM explosion were planned by the same person. Shortly after, Kang realized that someone was coming for them, so he made up an excuse to go to the restroom, even though his intention was to eliminate the threat alone. After killing the mysterious attacker, Kang returned with his clothes stained with blood, which immediately shocked Byung-nam and Young-hee. But they were even more shocked when they noticed that someone was controlling the computer remotely, and soon, all the data vanished from there. Then, a warning message popped up, and it was addressed to Kang, who was revealed to be a former member of a highly classified special operations unit who worked abroad secretly. The message ordered him to stop interfering. The message then concluded with a sentence, saying the person behind this would soon expose Kang's history and burn down the entire neighborhood where he was currently trying to hide. Then, the laptop immediately turned off permanently. Panicked by the danger, Kang quickly invited the two to handle the corpse of the hitman he had just eliminated. However, when they went to the restroom, the body had already vanished from there, and the place looked clean, as if nothing ever happened there. They could not even find any surveillance camera footage of the incident. This made Kang even more certain that they were dealing with a professional syndicate that worked without leaving any trace behind. After that incident, Kang attempted to blend into the community by hanging out with the men there, along with the neighborhood chief and Namyeon's partner, Soo-il. They then discussed the car collision that had caused a commotion. Fortunately, the owner of the nearby shop there witnessed the accident firsthand, so Kang went to ask him to find clues. The man recalled seeing a fire truck arrive shortly after the explosion occurred. However, a towing vehicle appeared soon after to secure the wreckage, followed by 2 military transport trucks that moved quickly to clean up the scene. Upon hearing the details, Kang realized that such military units were usually deployed only for major natural disasters, and that made him wonder why the army would interfere in a common accident. The next day, Kang discovered that the driver from the first explosion had passed away, leaving behind his family to live in poverty. Moved by sympathy for their situation, Kang decided to pay a visit to the victim's family. Upon arriving at their home, however, he instead discovered a gang of loan sharks terrorizing them, so he quickly handed some cash to the family and told them to go out and buy some ice cream so they would not have to witness the violence he was about to do. Seeing this, the loan shark boss, Sang-ho, was furious and ordered his men to beat Kang. However, they had picked the wrong target to mess with. Instead of beating Kang, the thugs were beaten within seconds.
다 적었어? 예.
Then, without showing any fear, he threatened Sang-ho, demanding that he pay 6.5 million won in damages for the destruction he had caused to the family's home. He made it clear that if the money was not delivered immediately, he would make them suffer more. Somewhere else, 2 young men had just completed their mandatory military service. They were Myung-oh, who was an orphan, and his close friend Jung-hwan, who came from a wealthy family. After the graduation ceremony, Myung-oh introduced Jung-hwan to Namyeon because Jung-hwan would work as her child's tutor. After that, Myung-oh immediately left because it was his very first day on the job. He quickly boarded a public bus, and uploaded a quick update to his social media profile to show his happiness. However, that joy was cut short when a massive explosion suddenly happened, destroying the bus completely in front of the locals. Before long, a crowd gathered in front of Nam-yeon's store. During the commotion, Nam-yeon mentioned that she saw a lot of military personnel entering their neighborhood. Upon hearing this, Kang pulled Byung-nam aside for a serious discussion. He told Byung-nam that he was sure that the 3 recent explosions were connected, and based on the color of the smoke, they must be caused by a modified version of C4 explosives that was developed by the military forces. Somewhere else, the Minister of Defense received a report confirming that the explosions in the neighborhood did involve that specific military-grade C4, which came from their own illegal black market sales overseas. Shortly after that, Eun-jae arrived at the office completely furious. She feared that their plan to buy up the local real estate would collapse entirely if the bombings continued. They realized that their secret agenda had leaked. However, the Vice Minister of Defense, Gun Cheol, had suspected something fishy between Eun-jae and the minister. Somewhere else, Kang joined the men from the neighborhood to attend Myung-oh's funeral. During the ceremony, Jung-hwan shared Myung-oh's final social media photo that he had uploaded just moments before the tragedy. Then, upon seeing the image closely, Young-hee noticed a familiar rabbit doll on the back seat. This immediately reminded them of the doll from the deceased's house and the trash days earlier, and they quickly realized that the innocent-looking dolls were bombs. Upon uncovering this truth, Jung-hwan demanded to join Kang's team to avenge his friend's death on the mastermind. On the other hand, because of the terrors going on in the neighborhood, Eun-jae decided to install some cameras across the neighborhood and made the footage available to be seen over the internet. For Kang, however, this only made it easier for the mastermind to monitor the residents. Then, to prove his point, he did a ridiculous dance with Byung-nam in front of the camera to provoke the mastermind. Meanwhile, a journalist named In-seop was busy interviewing local residents regarding the ATM explosion, and he found out that everyone rejected the government's claim, saying that the explosion was caused by a gas leak, as they were sure that the incident was a targeted bomb attack. They even accused the government of shielding a greedy politician who was destroying their community. Like a wildfire, this explosive news spread fast across the internet, causing the Minister of Defense to panic that his illicit international arms-dealing network would soon be exposed. However, unbeknownst to him, Vice Minister Gun Cheol had started a secret investigation regarding the explosion. He had also opened a highly classified document inside a briefcase, which showed the complete military profile of Kang. On the other hand, Kang, along with Byung-nam and the rest of the team, decided to collaborate with In-seop. They presented and handed over all the evidence from their independent investigation, starting from the discoveries of the rabbit dolls to the laptop. During the meeting, Kang suddenly realized that the laptop had been bugged, so they whispered while blasting music at maximum volume to mask their voices. They then planned a clever strategy to clone the laptop and to lure the mastermind into a location. However, after the meeting, Soo-il accidentally saw them leaving their secret hiding spot. However, instead of getting suspicious about them, he felt jealous because he wasn't invited to join their circle. Soon, Kang and the team's operation started. To start it, Byung-nam and Jung-hwan made a signal jammer using aluminum foil. They then transported the laptop directly to the local police station, and after confirming that the tracking device's signal was active, Jung-hwan slipped the laptop back into the signal jammer to completely cut off the connection. Thanks to this tactic, the final location broadcast to the mastermind was the police station, and it was done to make the perpetrator believe that their asset had been secured by the authorities, even though the group had secretly taken it back so Young-hee could crack it. However, despite having a solid plan, Young-hee quickly realized that he didn't have the equipment to crack the laptop's system. Fortunately, while the group was confused about how to get the expensive hacking tools, Jung-hwan casually revealed that he had already purchased all the tools they needed. The next morning, Byung-nam set up a hidden camera in front of the police station. He was certain that the mastermind would eventually show up to investigate the device. However, while he was doing his task, Soo-il suddenly confronted them, saying that he was jealous because they didn't include them in their gatherings. He then went into his shop and complained, saying that his friends were afraid of befriending him because he had a fierce wife. Meanwhile, Young-hee began to break into the laptop using the tools bought by Jung-hwan. He stayed inside a makeshift tent lined entirely with foil, ensuring the signal remained blocked from the mastermind's radar. After spending several days working tirelessly, Young-hee finally managed to breach the security system and copy all of the encrypted database files. However, their secret gathering was being watched from afar by Soo-il. Feeling completely heartbroken, he complained to Nam-yeon, causing her to confront the group for ostracizing her husband. Terrified of her temper, the group quickly excused themselves one by one, leaving Byung-nam to face her alone. Cornered, Byung-nam was forced to come clean about their operations. He explained that they were not gathering to have fun, but rather to solve the mystery of the bombings that had been happening lately. He admitted that he didn't invite Soo-il because he feared that the information might leak to the rest of the neighborhood. However, despite this clear explanation, Nam-yeon didn't care much about the bomb investigation and told him to include her husband in their gatherings. After that confrontation, In-seop moved quickly to expose the conspiracy, uploading all of the files recovered from the laptop directly onto his news channel. Thanks to this, the public began to realize that the 3 explosions were not random accidents, but rather related terrorist attacks. However, panic reached its peak the next morning when the National Emergency Response Center received a direct bomb threat targeted at their neighborhood. From the surveillance footage, a suspicious individual was seen abandoning a black backpack at a public bus stop. Unfortunately, Nam-yeon's daughter happened to find the bag and picked it up, causing the military forces and a bomb disposal squad to immediately surround her. The news soon reached Nam-yeon and Soo-il, and they rushed off to see their daughter. At that moment, a truth was revealed when several military personnel instantly recognized Nam-yeon, revealing that she was a former bomb disposal instructor and one of the best the country had ever had. Without the slightest of doubt, the military personnel immediately allowed Nam-yeon to handle the bomb on her own. Then, with her trembling hands, she tried to calm her daughter while slowly snipping one of the wires. However, when she finally opened it, it turned out that the bomb was empty, meaning this was merely a bluff or a message to lure someone. Meanwhile, because of In-seop's bold move to upload the confidential data, the Minister of Defense was cornered, forcing him to publicly accuse the broadcast of being a hoax to taint the country's reputation. He even ordered his subordinates to kidnap In-seop to silence the truth forever. On the other hand, Kang attempted to forget all the tension by taking his wife and daughter out to an amusement park. However, the peace was cut short when Kang discovered that Do-yeon was already holding an ice cream given by a stranger. The stranger was a man named Sullivan. He wasn't associated with the government, but he was sure giving off the intimidating aura, and that made it clear that the enemy could reach Kang and his family at any moment. That night, when Jung-hwan went to visit In-seop's office, he found the place ransacked and discovered that In-seop had vanished without a trace. On the other hand, Nam-yeon, who had previously been reluctant to get involved, finally lost her patience. The bomb threat targeting her daughter had triggered her to move, so she went to confront Byung-nam to ask the identity of the mastermind behind the terror. However, Byung-nam didn't know who the culprit was, so he couldn't give any answer to her. Shortly after that, Jung-hwan arrived to deliver the news regarding In-seop. Then, as everyone was in a panic, Kang suddenly received a call from a mysterious number. It turned out the caller was his former superior back when he was in the military, and he was none other than Gun Cheol. He then asked Kang to meet. Kang immediately went to the secret meeting point with Gun Cheol. During the meeting, Gun Cheol revealed the evidence he had gathered, confirming that all the explosives used in the recent explosion were indeed the modified C4 produced by the military. Based on these findings, he concluded that the only one capable of causing the terror was the Minister of Defense, Suk-jun, who held access to the nation's weapons technology and troops. Although Kang initially refused to get involved in Gun Cheol's secret operation, he eventually agreed to cooperate under 2 conditions. First, he wanted them to track where In-seop was being held captive, and second, he wanted Gun Cheol to erase all data about himself being a former Special Forces member. After Gun Cheol agreed to the conditions, he quickly located In-seop. He even managed to list possible individuals involved in the kidnapping. He then conveyed the information to Kang, who then immediately informed Byung-nam and Yong-hee that Gun Cheol would help their operation. In the middle of that conversation, Jung-hwan suddenly arrived with Nam-yeon, causing them to immediately fall silent. Seeing their expression, Nam-yeon immediately realized that they were hiding a secret from her. After accepting Nam-yeon into their team, they quickly made a plan to save In-seop, but while reviewing the plan, Nam-yeon wondered why the rest of the team was so confident, despite not knowing the exact location of In-seop. However, Byung-nam accidentally leaked that they actually had a trusty informant. Upon hearing this, she finally proved her suspicion that Kang was not an ordinary person. The next morning, Kang dropped Do-yeon off at her school, where he encountered Olivia, a new teacher who seemed to be friendly with his daughter. Seeing her gave Kang a brief sense of relief, making him feel that his daughter was in safe hands, so he could focus his attention on the operation. Shortly after that, Kang arrived at Byung-nam's shop to complete their final preparations. Byung-nam then equipped Kang with a mini GPS disguised as a shirt button, along with a custom-built stun gun so he could easily fight the enemies without killing them. After that, Kang prepared himself to infiltrate the location to save In-seop. On his way to the location, Kang contacted Sang-ho, the loan shark boss, to ask for his assistance. The two then met in an alley to switch cars to erase his trail, knowing that the military under Suk-jun would be tracking his movements. Upon arriving at the rescue location, Kang instantly moved. Although the custom stun gun built by Byung-nam looked strange, it was really effective at neutralizing the guards. Then, before taking In-seop out of there, Kang managed to plant the GPS fitted with a lens onto the uniform of an unconscious guard, allowing him to track their operations. Then, after switching cars back with Sang-ho, Kang took In-seop to a gas station, where an underground bunker prepared by Gun-cheol was located. That place served as their base for their operation. Kang then immediately called Byung-nam to come to the facility. Unfortunately, Byung-nam was standing right next to Nam-yeon and the others when the call came through, so he tried to speak in a whisper, but he accidentally pressed the loudspeaker button instead, causing everyone to hear the conversation. Thanks to that, soon, the team showed up at the hideout, leaving Kang completely surprised to see his secret facility exposed. This hidden facility was intentionally set up by Gun-cheol to allow them to conduct their investigation without being traced by any parties. In addition to the technology, they would also be assisted by a female military operative named Soo-jin. When she showed up, her beauty immediately captivated Yong-hee, especially after learning that she was single and wanted to get married soon. Meanwhile, Suk-jun was furious upon finding out that In-seop had managed to escape, and he vented his anger on his own subordinates. However, unbeknownst to him, his action was captured perfectly by the mini lens that Kang had planted on the guard earlier. Unfortunately, when Kang told Byung-nam to access the live stream online, they discovered that the signal had already been cut out. Wasting no time, Kang and Byung-nam immediately drove out to the industrial sector, which marked the final coordinates where the tracking lens had registered. However, the scale of the area and the severed transmission forced them back down. At that moment, Byung-nam realized they needed a small and fast vehicle to transport the GPS resetting tool directly into the heart of the facility. The perfect solution was a remote-controlled car, and fortunately, Jung-hwan actually had a collection of RC cars that could be used for the mission. Meanwhile, Yong-hee attempted to flirt with Soo-jin under the pretext of storing their recovered laptop inside the signal-proof chamber. He tried his best to catch her eye, and fortunately, Soo-jin permitted him to enter. However, when Yong-hee returned wearing a neat outfit to win her heart, he instead received a cold response. She even told him not to do it again. Meanwhile, Byung-nam used his skill to build a new weapon for Kang. It was a tactical staff built to be as durable as steel yet incredibly light. Although it looked like a toy, the staff was packed with hidden mechanisms that even elite special forces units did not have. This tool was made so Kang could fight, even without a gun. Their big plan was finally made. Byung-nam, Jung-hwan, and Yong-hee took charge of operating the RC car to find the exact location of the mini lens. Then, after finding the coordinate, Kang would retrieve it, as it was their primary evidence to expose In-seop's kidnapping. Without the team knowing, a conspiracy happened. Eun-jae held a secret meeting with the National Assembly chairman to collect on a favor. It turned out that on September 18, the chairman's son, Woo Sang, had hit and killed Sullivan's daughter while driving under the influence of alcohol. Then, by using the real estate development projects in the area, Eun-jae and Suk-jun manipulated the case into the military court, and thanks to their power in the military, Woo Sang was eventually free of all charges, even though he was clearly guilty of Sullivan's daughter's death. Strangely, despite knowing the corrupt government, Sullivan chose to invest in the politician's project anyway. However, there was a method to his madness, because it was his plan to avenge the corrupt officials from the inside out. Meanwhile, the mission day finally arrived. The team was ready to retrieve the missing tracking lens. However, an obstacle emerged from Kang's home just before they started, as his wife asked him to accompany her to the local market. Because of this, he found himself in a dilemma. He knew the mission relied on him, but he could not reject his wife's demand without raising suspicions. At the same time, the mission started with a lot of drama. After running only a few meters, Yong-hee's RC car suddenly flipped over on the pavement. On the other hand, Byung-nam's RC car was smashed into pieces after being run over by a passing car. Because of that, the two were forced to comb the area on foot with the RC car in their hands just to pick up the tracking signal. The team's only hope was now on Jung-hwan's RC car. Unfortunately, it also crashed into a pedestrian's leg. Panicked, Byung-nam ran to retrieve it and was forced to lie, claiming that he was a construction worker working on the site. Fortunately, Yong-hee eventually detected the signal and immediately transmitted the exact coordinates. Jung-hwan then showed up to pick up Yong-hee, who now had to monitor the surroundings. Meanwhile, at the local market, Kang was accompanying his wife through the crowded stalls. He managed to catch a quick moment to call Nam-yeon, informing her that he wouldn't be able to show up for the mission on time. So, Nam-yeon decided to leave first after Jung-hwan arrived to pick her up. Then, since Kang couldn't make it on time, they were forced to execute their backup plan without him. To continue their mission, Byung-nam immediately disguised himself as a food delivery courier to distract the security personnel at the entrance. Unfortunately, a real delivery worker showed up at that exact moment, causing his cover to blow completely. Fortunately, Namyeon successfully infiltrated the area and quickly neutralized several guards. However, because they were outnumbered, they were eventually captured. Back at the market, Kang kept spacing out because he was worried about his friends. His wife soon noticed it and finally told him to leave and take care of his business, but under one condition, saying that he had to return home without a single scratch on his body. Having finally received the green light, Kang left for the mission. Fortunately, he arrived at the perfect time and eliminated all the enemies using his tactical staff. After successfully escaping the facility and returning to their hideout, Namyeon immediately dumped a pile of buttons onto the table because she had taken them up at random, not knowing which one was the actual mini lens. Fortunately, after finding the lens and inspecting it, they uncovered shocking evidence, confirming that the mastermind behind Inseop's abduction was Suk-jun. Meanwhile, news of the raid on the facility reached Suk-jun's ears, and he felt so confused that intruders had come only to steal clothing buttons from the site. However, that confusion quickly became pure terror when he discovered a new detail through a classified document, revealing that the mysterious buyer who had been purchasing his illegal military C4 explosives at double the market price all this time was actually Sullivan. This finally revealed the truth behind the bombings. The perpetrator was Sullivan, who planned to take revenge on him. On the other hand, Kang quickly delivered the footage directly to Gun Cheol. This evidence was more than enough to drag Suk-jun to court for kidnapping and state fund embezzlement. Gun Cheol then decided to transfer the file to the International Investigation Division to prevent the military from interfering to cover up the crime. Upon returning home, Kang had to face a thorough inspection from his wife. Worried, she examined his body to ensure he was uninjured, as she feared that he might be returning to a dangerous mission. The next morning, Suk-jun was interrogated regarding the leaked abduction video that had been spread on the internet. However, Suk-jun argued that the footage was generated by AI to accuse him. He even threatened his interrogators, vowing that if they continued the investigation, he would destroy their careers and reputations. Upon hearing that threat, the interrogators suggested that Suk-jun issue a public clarification immediately. However, he refused the advice because he believed that he was untouchable. Then, Gun Cheol suddenly entered the interrogation room and told everyone to leave. In front of Gun Cheol, Suk-jun denied the charges involving the C4 explosives dealings. Instead, he played the victim, claiming that the independent investigation had ruined his plan to capture the real terrorist. A few days later, not a single news report about Suk-jun's corruption. Frustrated, Inseop then discussed the matter with Kang, who finally gave him permission to upload the footage of Suk-jun's scandal to start the public outrage. Meanwhile, Suk-jun realized that Kang was the orchestrator of his downfall, so he ordered his subordinates to kidnap his wife. Fortunately, Namyeon successfully intercepted the kidnappers and ruined their mission.
괜찮아? 네, 괜찮아요. 가만 있어봐. 그러면 용이가 더 빨라.
After that, realizing that Kang's family had become Suk-jun's target, Young-hee rushed out to pick up Do-yeon, who was still at school. News of the attempted kidnapping of his wife made Kang furious, so he immediately prepared to face Suk-jun. However, he was stopped by Byung-nam, who reminded him not to act blindly on emotion, insisting that they must continue to move as a team to ensure everyone's safety. Meanwhile, because Inseop's video had spread on the internet, Suk-jun's office was completely surrounded by reporters. Feeling cornered, he then went to see Eun-jae to find a solution and revealed that Sullivan was the person behind the bombings. However, instead of helping to solve the problem peacefully, Eun-jae gave a crazy suggestion, telling Suk-jun to blow up the local police station and frame Sullivan for the attack and claim that Inseop was his partner in crime. By doing this, he could make a public statement that his leaked video was just a trick to capture the real terrorist, and that way, he would be able to gain the people's trust again. The next day, Young-hwan was told to pick up Namyeon's daughter from school, and he did it happily. However, while he was on his way, he saw Suk-jun's henchmen wandering around the neighborhood, so he quickly followed them and reported back to the rest of the team, letting them know that some people had just left a mysterious box in front of the police station. At the same time, Soo-il happened to be inside the police station to deliver an order. Then, after monitoring the situation through the security cameras, Byung-nam called Soo-il and asked him to check on the box, so he quickly did it. However, as soon as he checked the content, he realized that there was a bomb inside, so Byung-nam told him to run away as fast as possible. However, seeing that the area was crowded, Soo-il suddenly decided to bring the bomb with him to save the lives of the citizens. He even took a moment to call his wife to say his final goodbyes during the process. After that, Byung-nam tried to call him again, but he chose to ignore the call to focus on saving the neighborhood. On the other hand, Kang stopped Suk-jun's henchmen, and a fierce fistfight broke out on the street. One of them then pressed a remote detonator. However, the explosion never happened because it turned out that the bomb was already put inside the bunker that blocked any signal, all thanks to Byung-nam's quick thinking, as he had instructed Sewell to transport the device directly there. Meanwhile, Suk-jun attempted to flee the country with a briefcase full of embezzled cash, but his escape was cut short when Kang suddenly showed up in front of him. In that moment, after being threatened by Kang, Suk-jun suddenly confessed that Sullivan was the true mastermind behind the bombings. Then, after securing this information, Kang gave Suk-jun a lesson. After that, Kang rushed toward an abandoned facility inside the forest to confront Sullivan. Upon meeting, Sullivan explained that he had uncovered Kang's past as a secret intelligence operative simply by using his money. He also admitted that he had approached Do-yun for a specific reason, saying that she looked incredibly similar to his late daughter and that both girls loved rabbits. Sullivan thanked Kang for taking down Suk-jun on his behalf, but he then gave him a warning, saying that if Kang continued to intervene with his plan, his family would become his next target. Upon hearing that, Kang could only stand there and hold his anger because it turned out that a team of snipers was aiming at him, ready to take his life. Meanwhile, the authorities finally arrested Suk-jun on charges of kidnapping a civilian and dealing weapons illegally. With that arrest, his career eventually came to an end. As soon as Suk-jun was arrested, Sullivan's revenge plan finally started. From a high building, he watched Woo Sang, the person who had killed his daughter. He then contacted Eun-jae to deliver a single message, saying that anyone who had corrupted the legal system to protect Woo Sang would pay for their sins. Then, at that exact moment, Sullivan rammed Woo Sang's car, killing him instantly on the spot. It was a calculated revenge that perfectly mirrored the tragedy that killed his daughter. Panicked after hearing the threat, Eun-jae called the chairman, but the call was cut short when the chairman received the news about his son. At that moment, Eun-jae finally realized that Sullivan was not playing games, and that she would be his next target. Meanwhile, Kang received crucial information from Gun-chil, who revealed that the entire illegal military weapons smuggled to the Middle East by Suk-jun had been bought by Sullivan. Then, after the death of Woo Sang, Sullivan only had one more target, which was Eun-jae. Amid the terror that haunted Eun-jae, someone named Ali showed up at Nam-yeon's store, and by pure coincidence, Soo-il saw a photograph inside his wallet, and he immediately noticed that the other person in that photo was the victim from the ATM explosion. Somewhere else, Kang was concerned for Eun-jae's safety, so he asked Nam-yeon, whom he knew was a friend of Eun-jae, for Eun-jae's personal phone number, saying that it was urgent. Then, that very night, Kang met with Eun-jae to warn her that she was in danger, and just right after that, Sullivan's henchmen suddenly showed up and tried to attack Eun-jae. Fortunately, Kang was quick enough to defend her. The next day after that attack, Eun-jae went to meet Nam-yeon and immediately told her about it, which made Nam-yeon surprised because Kang decided to move on his own. Upon hearing that news, she immediately told Byung-nam about it, and that made him wonder just how much of a secret Kang was hiding from them. On the other hand, when delivering a food order, Soo-il tried his best to dig up some information from Ali, who worked at a local research laboratory. During their chat, a fact was revealed, telling that both Ali and the other person in the photo had once worked for Sullivan in an organization he owned. Meanwhile, back at the secret base, Soo-jin handed over a file about Sullivan to Kang, revealing that Sullivan was actually an adopted child raised in America, and he now led an elite security organization named Novus, and the person who had attacked Eun-jae the previous night was a member of that same organization. At that moment, Yong-hee happened to walk in and overhear this news, so he quickly passed this information to Byung-nam and the rest of the crew. Thanks to that, they finally realized that Kang had been working on his own because he did not want to drag them into danger anymore. On the other hand, Nam-yeon received a mysterious mobile phone delivered by Sullivan. She then received a call on that phone, and it was Sullivan, giving his ultimatum, saying that she had 12 hours to make a press conference and publicly confess her crime to defend the killer of his daughter, or he would blow up the entire neighborhood. Upon hearing that threat, Yoon-ja was terrified, so he called Kang for help. However, when Kang finally arrived to help, Sullivan called the phone once more to deliver a final warning, saying that he had planted 2 separate bombs because Kang had dared to interfere in his business. Knowing that they were running out of time, Kang finally gathered the entire team and told them to warn people to stay inside their homes while he went to confront Sullivan's henchmen. Upon hearing that, Byung-nam protested, asking Kang not to keep anything a secret from the rest of the crew anymore. However, Kang refused their help, saying that the henchmen were professional operatives and would be impossible for them to handle. The next morning, Kang decided not to let Do-yeon attend her classes to ensure her safety before going to the secret bunker to ask Soo-jin to track the enemies. At the same time, the rest of the crew members went to warn the people to stay inside their houses. Meanwhile, Eun-jae was ready for her press conference. However, at that moment, Jung-hwan realized that if Sullivan was targeting Eun-jae, he might have planted the bomb at the venue. So, based on that hunch, the crew decided to go there to check. At that same time, Kang met the neighborhood chief, who had just finished telling the residents to stay home. Then, he suddenly remembered that Sullivan was an adopted child, so he asked the chief about the nearest adoption center within their district. The chief then told him that the local community church had previously served as an adoption center years ago. Upon hearing that, Kang began to suspect that one of the planted bombs was hidden in there. The chief then immediately relayed Kang's suspicions to Byung-nam, who then rushed to find Kang with the rest of the crew. On the other hand, in front of the reporters, Eun-jae publicly confessed that she had been receiving bomb threats. At that moment, Namyeon realized that the bomb was actually planted in the mobile phone, given by Sullivan to Eun-jae. Upon realizing that, she dashed forward and kicked the phone away just in time. Meanwhile, Kang successfully located the second bomb in the church tower. Then, right before it exploded, Byung-nam arrived on the scene and kicked Kang to the ground below to avoid the explosion. The bomb finally went off. But Kang managed to survive. However, worried about Byung-nam, he immediately went on the rooftop, only to discover that Byung-nam had somehow survived the blast because he was wearing a custom-made body armor. After saving Eun-jae, Namyeon had to be treated at the hospital since her wrist was injured. However, she felt okay and wanted to just go home. Shortly after that, Eun-jae showed up to thank her because she had saved her life. Meanwhile, in a different room, Byung-nam bragged to the others that he had just saved Kang. Fortunately, he only suffered minor injuries, so he was allowed to go home immediately. However, Kang still looked anxious, knowing that the terror would never stop until Sullivan was captured. Somewhere else, Gun-cheol met with Eun-jae to ask her to give all data regarding Suk-jun's corruption, and in exchange, he promised to protect her from Sullivan. Of course, Eun-jae accepted the deal without hesitation. In the end, for her safety, Eun-jae had to stay inside the hidden bunker with Soo-jin for a while. A few days later, Kang and his wife showed up at Do-yeon's school to watch her present her classroom project, which was a rabbit sculpture crafted out of clay. The presentation was conducted entirely in English, and thanks to Olivia, who had taught her, she could speak fluently. After the presentation, the teacher let everyone take their work home, as it turned out that the sculpture could be used as a night lamp. However, a shocking truth was suddenly revealed. It turned out that Olivia was actually working under Sullivan, and she had secretly planted bombs inside every single doll crafted by the children at school. Later on, while driving his daughter back to school, Kang accidentally saw Soo-il, who was on his way to deliver a food order to Ali. Soo-il then informed him that Ali was a close friend of the ATM explosion victim. Upon hearing that, Kang decided to come with him so he could ask for more information from Ali. During their meeting, Ali admitted that he had been friends with the victim for a very long time. However, the deceased started distancing himself ever since he joined Sullivan's organization, Novus. Ali also explained that the group consisted strictly of foreigners living in South Korea, and only specific individuals who held an invitation were allowed to join. After that, Ali showed them a photograph of the organization's members, and Kang was shocked to see Olivia in the picture, which finally revealed the truth to him. That fact made Kang freeze, and he immediately went to the school to look for Olivia. However, she was on leave for a vacation that day. After that, he went to her house, but unfortunately, the landlord informed him that she had already moved out. At the same time, one of the student parents asked Byung-nam to fix their child's clay doll because the light inside would not turn on. Then, when he broke it open to check the wiring, he discovered that there was a bomb hidden inside. Upon seeing that, Byung-nam gathered all the crew members at the hidden bunker to share the news. Kang was sure that a bomb was hidden inside every single doll given out by Olivia because she was an operative working for Sullivan. Because of this, everyone had to split up to collect all the sculptures from all the students. Kang also asked Sang-ho and his henchmen for assistance to finish the task much faster. After that, Kang rushed back home to take Do-yeon's doll. However, it was missing from its place because Do-yeon had carried it along with her to school. After that, Sullivan suddenly called him and ordered him to stop interfering, saying that if he did not comply, all the bombs would detonate immediately. Feeling there was no other choice, Kang immediately called his team and told them to stop gathering the sculptures. Shortly after that, Kang was told by his wife that Do-yeon was missing, so he immediately went to her school to check the security cameras. From the footage, he saw that his daughter walked away with Olivia. Kang then told his wife to stay calm and promised that he would bring their daughter back safely. Fortunately, with the help of Geun Chol, he quickly located Sullivan's headquarters. Amid the tense moments, Jung Hwan had an idea to block the signals so the bombs could not be detonated from a distance, and that idea reminded Byung-nam of a tool he had built before that could cut off the power to the whole neighborhood. It was a detector that could also block and turn off electromagnetic waves. Because of this, he planned to use a similar method. However, there were 3 signal transmitters in that area, meaning they needed 3 devices to cut the signal entirely. However, he only had one, and that was a problem. Young-hee suddenly remembered that Soo-jin also had the same device, so he quickly ran to the hidden bunker to borrow the equipment from her. Unfortunately, she only had one device as well, but on his way back, Young-hee accidentally crossed paths with Soo-il and Ali. He then explained their plan to them, and by sheer luck, Ali also had a similar tool and happily lent it to them. Thanks to that, they finally had the 3 devices needed to shut down the electromagnetic waves. After that, they split up the tasks. Byung-nam, Nam-yeon, and Jung-hwan would each travel to a different transmitter to cut off the signals. Meanwhile, Soo-il had to handle another important task, so he picked up the neighborhood chief to help him move faster. Meanwhile, Young-hee stayed behind to keep watch at the base to maintain their communications and time everything so they could act simultaneously. On the other hand, Kang had arrived at Sullivan's headquarters. He tried to search for Do-yeon there, but he could not find her anywhere. However, when he stepped into a room, some mercenaries suddenly blocked his path and tried to attack him. Fortunately, the chief and Soo-il arrived just in time. It turned out that the chief was actually a former sniper. They then gave Kang some tactical gear so he could continue his mission to find Do-yeon. Thanks to their help and the gear, Kang eventually defeated all the henchmen. Including the man who had previously attacked him and Eun-jae. In the end, Kang successfully located Do-yeon, who was held hostage by Sullivan. Kang then tried to persuade Sullivan not to detonate the bomb there, but Sullivan refused because he was disappointed by the public, who did not care about his daughter's death. He only wanted his daughter's death to become a historic moment that would be remembered by everyone forever. After that, Sullivan told Do-yeon to hand over a mobile phone that contained the detonator switch. Sullivan then explained that if Kang pressed that button, Do-yeon would be saved, but every single bomb hidden inside the other children's sculptures would blow up the entire neighborhood, meaning Kang had to choose between saving his own daughter and saving the innocent citizens. However, if he failed to make a choice, Sullivan would press his own trigger to blow up Do-yeon, along with everyone else. Facing this difficult situation, Kang tried his best to stall for time. Fortunately, Byung-nam and Jung-hwan eventually disabled the transmitters and launched fireworks into the sky as a signal that they had succeeded. However, no fireworks appeared from Nam-yeon's direction because her device somehow failed to work. Because of that, Young-hee ordered her to just cut the transmitter wires manually instead. At the same time, Sullivan's henchmen managed to slip inside the hidden bunker, but fortunately, Soo-jin and Young-hee successfully defeated them. Looking at his monitor screen, the veteran saw that the storekeeper had finally succeeded in destroying her signal tower, so he confidently pressed the switch on the mobile phone. In the end, Sullivan's plan had completely failed, leaving him furious and causing Do-yeon to cry out in fear. Kang then told her to leave first, and after she left, he immediately attacked Sullivan and beat him until he was completely helpless. Cornered, Sullivan said that he only wanted to get revenge for his daughter's death, saying that Kang would have done the same thing if he lost his own daughter. However, Kang simply shot both Sullivan's hands because he had dared to kidnap his daughter. When Kang walked outside, the authorities arrived to arrest Sullivan. However, in the last second, Sullivan chose to blow himself up using Do-yeon's clay doll, which Do-yeon had previously gifted to him to honor his late daughter. After all the chaos ended, Kang returned home with his daughter. They were then greeted by his wife, who had been worrying about Do-Yun's safety and could not stop crying. Eventually, after the series of terror she received, Nam-Yun realized the consequences of her actions and decided to resign as a form of accountability. However, shortly after her resignation, Suk-Jun contacted her. It turned out that he had recorded their conversation when they planned to blow up the police station and frame Sullivan. He then threatened to leak the footage unless Eun-jae paid him a massive amount of cash. However, unbeknownst to them, Gun-cheol actually overheard the entire conversation. A secret meeting was eventually held for Eun-jae to hand over the cash. However, with the help of Gun-cheol, Suk-Jun, who tried to escape, was eventually arrested and was locked away for all his crimes. At the same time, In-seop secretly broadcast the arrest live on his news channel, and he even told the public to remember the death of Sullivan's daughter. Later, Kang went on a family vacation to a bicycle museum with his wife and daughter. They also took Do-Yun's grandmother. Then, while driving back home, his wife told him to invite all their neighbors over for a gathering as a way to thank them for helping save their daughter. Meanwhile, Jung-hwan went out to have some fun alongside Nam-Yun's daughter, Yong-hee, and Soo-jin. At that moment, the girl said that she wanted to become a soldier after watching her mother defeat the bad guys. On the other hand, Yong-hee was still trying to get closer to Soo-jin, but when they passed a bridge, he seemed to have a fear of heights, which made it difficult for him to walk on his own. Seeing that, Soo-jin then helped him out, and from that moment on, their relationship seemed to grow much closer. On the other hand, Sang-ho decided to become a good person. He decided to work together with Kang to hunt down the insurance fraudsters who had been scamming people. Later, Kang hosted a dinner party for the local residents at his house, and after that, he and the crew hung out at a roadside food stall. However, that atmosphere was suddenly interrupted by a traffic accident happening right in front of them. Seeing that, without a single doubt, Kang and his team immediately helped. Because for them, the mission to protect their neighborhood would never end.